Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. I'm glad to have you with me today. And we do have a returning guest today. He is a co host of the Static Radio podcast, which has been going strong for 25 years now. Please welcome back Bob LeMent. Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, but we talked about doing this a while ago, but now it's finally happening. So that's the good part.
Yeah. So I did an episode with Bob back in it's either July or August.
Yeah, it was over the
And
summer.
yeah, and after the show was over, we were talking a little bit, and we decided that we wanted to do a movie review episode of a movie called The Primevals. And so that is what we have to offer you today. And uh, Bob, going into this, did you have any kind of expectations?
Well, it's an interesting movie in the sense that it's new, but it's not new. Can we say
Yes,
that?
yes, yes.
it was it was new back in I believe like the late 80s. Well, it has a whole storied past, but anyway, I think the principal photography was in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it got shelved for a while, and actually the director passed away in the interim, and then his producing partner wanted to finish it, and so they finally finished it, and it was released. And I think officially it says 2023, but somewhere late in 2023, I think. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of at this point, you would say this is a labor of love, I think.
yeah, absolutely. As Bob alluded to, the director passed away, unfortunately. Directed by David Allen. He passed away in 1999.
Yeah.
So at about 25 years ago, and this movie just finally got released early last year. So it's been hanging around there for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, after all these years, they would go ahead and do that. I mean, that's not your typical. I mean, there's so many movies that we don't get to see because of circumstance, or multiple different things that get put on a shelf and are never, ever, ever seen. And so it's kind of interesting that this one finally, made it out into the light of day, and people got to see it. The interesting thing about David Allen is, I mean, oh my gosh, what a resume this guy has. I had no idea going into this, and as I watch movies a lot of time these days, I usually look at IMDb at the same time, and I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy was prolific in all the different things that he worked on. And I mean, some of them are higher profile than others, but all in all, this guy was really quite a talented person and involved in a lot of really, you know, uh, legendary products that are still out there today. So that people will know. It's not like he's just did this one movie and then he passed away or anything. So
Yeah, yeah, he has an impressive resume, and just to name a few, he worked on Ghostbusters 2, Willow, the
mhm.
Twilight Zone movie. Uh,
Yeah.
so he had his hand in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying. I mean, and then he was in some movies that I really like that are not quite as mainstream. The Arrival, if you've ever seen that one, with Charlie Sheen. It's about terraforming of all things. But anyway, Freaked, which is Alex Winter's movie after Bill and Ted. He, was the director himself, and he made Freaked. There's one called Trancers, which is kind of uh, an 80s movie that is, I don't want to call it a real 80s movie, you know what I mean? So you can't, you have to watch it and you'll understand whenever what that sentence means. But, it was never a huge box office movie or anything like that. But it is so 80s in its delivery, and also an early role for oh, I'm a blank on her name now, so I'm gonna have to click on something to get my Helen Hunt.
Okay.
Yeah, so Helen Hunt was early role for her. She was really young at that point. Movie, and he was in. He helped with Caveman, which has got Ringo Starr, which is one of the only
Oh,
Ringo Starr movies.
I remember that one.
Yeah. So I mean, just so many. The Howling. I mean, all these. Some of these were kind of B movies, but these were essentially the B movies that made B movies become A list movies, if you can say that, because there was quite a lot of B movies back then, especially with the home video and whatnot. But because of those and how interesting they were, the B movie genre then got picked up by A-list directors, and they started making. So you think of Quentin Tarantino, you think of Robert Rodriguez, you think of all these guys. They were watching these movies and brought them up into the kind of the big leagues, if you were, and
Yeah, absolutely.
Marvel movies. There's Doctor Mordred, which is obviously uh, kind of a Doctor Strange, amalgam there. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing, all the things that this guy worked on. And then this would be officially, I guess, at this point, his last movie.
Yeah. And David Allen, as a animator, one of his specialties was stop motion animation, which we see in the Primevals. But before we dive into the actual movie, uh, what exactly is stop motion animation? Well, uh, it's when you take an object, like such as like a clay figure, for example, and in between frames, you move the object ever so slightly so that when you play it back, it gives the impression that it's moving on its own. Would you say that's a fair definition, Bob?
Yeah, I think that's a great definition.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, it the interesting thing about stop motion is everybody, you know, the art that goes into it, because you have typically a lot of times the people who are making those aren't just, taking off the shelf stuff. They make models and figures and bring it all to life. The most recent or more recent example would be like Wallace and Gromit, right? So there's a new Wallace and Gromit movie on Netflix, by the way. It's really good if you haven't watched it. and and so there's a huge artistry, with sculpting and so forth before you even animate, that is just amazing, with armatures and skeletal things, and you don't want to leave fingerprints on everything. And so yeah, it is something else. I kind of a weird side note, if you will. I did a stop motion film for college, and uh, for the only thing I can remember, it wasn't that good. Let's be honest with you, but the only thing, the claim to fame for it was when the teacher watched it. He's like, "Yours is the only movie I've ever watched where the person ate their project as they were filming it." Because what I did was I made popcorn come to life. There used to be this popcorn that was colors, like they were green or red or whatever, like microwave popcorn. So I popped the popcorn and I did everything and ran the film backwards. So I had a big pile of popcorn kind of making shapes, and then I would eat it. And then by the time we got to the end of the movie, it was just a couple of kernels, and then they danced around on the screen at the end and then disappeared. But yeah, so he was like, that's the first time I've had anybody eat their project. So I always thought that was a great, for me, that was a great, praise. Uh,
Did you get
but
a
it
good
was it
grade
was
on it?
fun to do. So yeah,
Did you get a good grade on it?
I think I did. I think I got an A for it, but he it was just kind of, thought it was kind of funny, because basically I just had this colored microwave popcorn, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if we rather than showing popcorn pop, we show the opposite, and so it goes from when you run it backwards, it goes from kernels into all this popcorn. Where in reality, I shot up everything backwards, so the popcorn went from a big thing of popcorn all the way down to kernels. So
That sounds pretty cool.
yeah, it was fun, and there's nothing to do while you're clicking away 2 frames at a time, so you eat the popcorn. That was the good part.
Now, so stop motion animation, the thing that really put it on the map was 1933 when Willis O'Brien created King Kong.
Yeah,
Uh, it was around before that, but that's really when it started to get popularized. Um,
because
and
King Kong was the main character.
yeah, yeah, that's a great movie even today.
Hmm.
Hard to believe we're coming up on the 100th anniversary in a few
Oh,
years.
really? Oh my.
Yeah,
I guess.
1933,
Well,
so
I
about
guess it's
8 more
got. Yeah,
years.
it'd be pretty close then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and you know, after Willis O'Brien, some of the other, I guess, more famous uses of stop motion, Rankin and Bass, the Christmas cartoons that they made,
Yeah.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and probably the most famous stop motion animator of all, Ray Harryhausen,
Yeah.
uh, the Sinbad movies, Jason and the Argonauts, 20 Million Miles to Earth, a whole
Hmm.
bunch of great movies there. Are you a fan of all those, Bob?
Oh yeah, and I think I've seen all of those as well. Was it the Beast from 10,000 Leagues or something? He couldn't say 20,000 Leagues, but I think it was 10,000 Leagues was the Beast that came up and tore up the bridge and everything. But
Yeah, yeah, the
I
giant
I
octopus.
remember watching all those as a kid. I mean, that was just like the best. If there was one of those kind of movies on, between that and you have Godzilla in your background and Godzilla movies, those were the two. Unfortunately, Godzilla was not stop motion,
Right.
uh, but yeah, all the Ray Harryhausen movies were had some elements of it, and really, I mean, really well made. Uh, the stop motion was generally much better than the acting in a certain number of those.
Yeah, you didn't watch those movies for the acting or the plot. You watched them for the
No.
creatures.
Right, yeah, exactly. Who you watched what cowboys roping scorpions and things like that were fantastic to watch.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, the actors themselves were oddly enough. The funny thing is the actors weren't as animated as the creatures.
Unfortunately, stop motion animation has kind of gone by the wayside now.
Yeah.
These days it mostly exists just in, um, animated films such as Wallace and Gromit, like you
Mhm.
mentioned. Um, it doesn't really get used too much anymore in live action movies, uh, which is kind of a shame.
It is, and I think that may be part of the reasoning behind having them, finishing this film was the fact that it's kind of a bit of a lost art at this point, and it does have a totally different look. I'm animated here tonight. If people are watching the video, and it's not the same, right? So there is a certain, je ne sais quoi, as they say, for stop motion movies because there's a whole certain look, a whole certain feel, and they're not quite as slick as 3D rendering and so forth at this point. And but there's a charm to them, and typically there's you can't help but like them. I mean, if there's anything on like that, I always watch it, and I always loved when I would see sequences like if you think of Better Off Dead, which is an '80s movie. There's the sequence with the hamburger to Van Halen, and it's all stop motion in the middle of a live action movie, and that everybody loves it, right? That little sequence itself kind of helped make that movie even better than what it was. It was a pretty good movie, but very quotable. But that little sequence alone was, really stood out.
Not familiar with that one, but I'll have to look it
You'll
up
have
and
to
check
watch
it
it.
out.
At
Yeah.
least you can skim until you get to the to that part if you just want to see the stop motion. But the song, if you look up "Everybody Wants Some" by Van Halen, I'm sure you'll
Okay.
find it on YouTube in and of itself because it's almost like a music video inside the movie. So
Bob, can you think of so in early mid '80s, Ray Harryhausen's last movie was uh, Clash of the Titans,
Clash of the Titans, yeah.
and so between now and then, can you think of any live action movies where stop motion played a big role in it?
A bigger role, like in Clash of the Titans. Uh, no, one of
Like
the
at least
problems. Which one?
like at least that's on par with like Clash of the Titans, where it was like a major part of
Yeah,
throughout the movie, not just in like a scene or two.
I can't because basically in I want to say it was 80. Oh, it's I've got David's list of things because he worked on the movie. Oddly enough, Young Sherlock Holmes in 1985 was the first real use of computer generated animation, like as a whole scene rather than just small elements, where they fought the stained glass knight. And so
Hmm.
that was really the turning point for everything. And so between Harryhausen's 1980 movie and 85, I don't recall anything because then after 85, everybody saw that movie and that scene, and then they started going in that direction because it was so impressive for the time. And there was other CGI things prior to that, a little bit, but not a whole character like in that movie.
Right.
But no, I can't. So, um, oh, uh, I'm cheating here because I'm looking at a list. But Q the Winged Serpent and David Allen worked on it had a monster in it, and I would say that was another main character like King Kong, and so that is one that happened after Clash of the Titans.
Okay.
And I did. Michael Moriarty is the lead actor in that. It's actually a pretty good movie if you've never seen it. Um, uh, I don't remember the winged serpent part on the title. I just remember it called Q. It's Quetzalcoatl, which is a Mexican folklore for a dragon type creature. And if you go, it's on the Mayan temple. If you ever see the Mayan temple, there's stairs, and then when the sun hits a certain part of the equinox or whatever, the sun shines and it looks like there's a serpent coming down the stairs. That's Quetzalcoatl. And so it all based off of that. And that was a pretty good movie because the serpent goes around, kills people and does all kinds of wreaks all kinds of havoc in the city. So that
Yeah,
would
I
be the other one. And then Twilight Zone, the movie had a few uh, stop motion things in it, but it wasn't really a major character or anything like that, I would say. And guess what? David Allen was part of that as well.
Yeah, well, I have not watched Q, but when I watched the Primevals on Shutter with a free week trial that they had, and I had planned on watching Q, but my trial expired before I got around to it. So,
Oh,
uh,
you got to watch. Well, Q is actually. I remember watching that quite a while ago. Gosh, it probably was on VHS to be honest with you.
oh,
And
okay,
but I did like it. It's a really good, monster movie. I mean, it's not quite on par with King Kong, but it's certainly worth the effort. If you get a chance to come across it, it's worth the watch. And it's kind of creepy and has monsters and things happen.
those are the best kind of movies.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to give too much away,
Yeah, yeah.
but it is worth the watch.
Okay, yeah, definitely gonna check that out. Uh, Bob, are you ready to dive into the Primevals?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to get your opinion on this because so the very first shot we have of the movie. It's like in the Himalayan mountains, and there's like snow swirling around,
Mhm.
and the music that's playing for a few seconds during that scene reminds me of a Rankin and Bass like Christmas cartoon movie. I don't know if you thought the same too, but it's
I didn't, but I can see now that you mentioned it. I can see where that could go that direction. But at the time when I watched it, I didn't. It didn't click in my head that way. But that's funny. Yeah. They.
uh, oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, after you.
I loved it though. The opening scene was dynamic, right? And there was no denying that you were watching something that was really um, made really really well. And the guys were fighting them, and they did all the tricks that Harryhausen did with ropes and keeping. They had the rope going from the creature to the actor, and it looked really good. And I mean, all of it worked really well. And it was, you mentioned the music. The music was probably the lowest part of that, because I think it was not too specific to the movie. I think it was kind of more generic, but the scene itself played out really really well, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, and just to set the stage for everyone, the movie starts off with this family end up in the Himalayan mountains, and I actually thought that it was two brothers and a sister, but it turns out that the person I thought was a sister was just a scientist who was visiting. Uh, but they're talking about this creature, and they refer to it as the Ancient One.
Hmm.
And the older brother says they have to prevent it from destroying everybody. And the scientist lady says, "No, we have to try and capture it instead of killing it." So they send this hunting party out, and a member of the hunting party is gonna shoot the creature, which is what they call a yeti. And the older brother stops him, only for the yeti to grab him and basically thrash him.
Right.
The the ensuing fight causes an avalanche and buries the yeti along with the older brother.
Right.
And so that's how we get started.
It was
Like,
thrilling
yeah, yeah. There was
and
that
really well done. It was really well done.
uh, one member of the hunting party. The the yeti just squashed him like a can. It was.
Yeah, he just goes. Yeah, that was a little brutal. But if you think about cinema in and of itself, Jurassic Park, they ate the lawyer in the toilet, so why not? I mean, this was before that, so it's kind of but that was that's kind of the thing, right? Even in the Harryhausen stuff, kind of somewhat comedic things happened during fight sequences and whatnot.
Yeah. It's entertaining for sure. And
I was kind of let down because I was hoping that we would be nonstop like that, and then this scene was really really good, and then we kind of slow down a little bit.
yeah, and so I actually, just because of the location, I thought maybe this was like in past times, but it was actually present day.
Hmm.
Like I said, up in the Himalayan mountains. And from that scene, we meet our main character, whose name is Matt. We find out that he did his PhD dissertation on the Yeti being real, and basically became a laughing stock for it. Uh, but he is invited back to the university, where it's revealed that they have the corpse of the Yeti that was killed in the opening scene.
Hmm.
Um, his colleague, Dr. Collier, is there to unveil it, and she invites Matt to take a look at it, and they discover that someone did brain surgery on the Yeti, which may have caused it to become violent.
Mm.
And it's from that point they end up going on a expedition.
Yeah, when
Um,
there's one, there's more,
yeah,
right? So
yeah. They want to find more, and they want to study them. So they
let's
plan an
see what the
expedition
deal
to
was.
Nepal, And Bob, no movie like this would be complete without a big game hunter type character. So along the way, they
Right.
pick up an old friend of Dr. Collier's, Rondo Montana, the big game hunter, and the three of them head over to Nepal along with the scientist lady from the beginning.
Yeah,
Uh,
Dr. Collier.
yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any particular thoughts on any of these characters as they're banding up?
Well, the the interesting thing about Dr. Collier is she's Juliet Mills, which is Haley Mills' sister, and this is when she's older, and she had she had a career, quite a career, prior to this. So she was, a known actor, right, at the time that this was shot back in the early 90s, late 80s and early 90s. Um, but and Matt Connor, apparently he's was in a bunch of movies with this producer, from what I read afterwards, and he plays a lot of lead characters in uh, these B type movies that were being made at that time. So he's in all kinds of different movies. But what struck me was Rondo, Montana. And I'm like, could you get any more Indiana Jones ish? You know? Uh, I'm like, because this would have been, after Indiana Jones was so popular, and the sequels as well, the original sequels, we'll call them, between 82 and 89. So yeah, I was like, I just couldn't believe the name. I was like, really, they went with that? Rondo, Montana. Maybe they should have called his first name Montana and his last name like Smith. Montana Smith would have been. I mean, they're already kind of taking the path of being Indiana Jones like. They might as well commit to it. The Rondo
Right?
part I did not buy at all. Who have you ever heard of anyone named Rondo? I never have.
Uh, nope.
No. I'm like, where'd they get that at? So
I mean,
yeah,
it's unique.
well, it is. I remembered it. So yeah, I think we had Rondo. He was pretty, as far as acting goes, he was pretty one note. But Juliet, and Dr. Collier and Matt, they seemed to hold their own pretty well. I would say they did all right there and all that. And the Himalayan guy, I think his name was Siku,
Yeah, the younger
did a
brother.
really good job. I could have not. I could have done without Rondo, to be honest with you. And he could have not been in the movie, but I know they needed some kind of a person to fill out the cast,
Yeah, some
and
kind
they
of
wanted to
tough
have
guy to
some
throw in
guy who
there.
was a hunter. Yeah, how they gonna catch this Yeti? Dr. Collier's gonna have the dart gun. I don't know.
Yeah, so Matt, Dr. Collier, Rondo, Siku, and the scientist whose name is Kathy, the five of them, they head out into the mountains to look for the Yeti, and they actually do stumble across one, or rather,
Mm.
Siku does, and he was going to shoot it. He wants to kill it for get revenge for his brother dying.
Avenge his brother. Yeah, you squished my brother and my friend.
Yeah, but Rondo stopped him.
Yeah, that Rondo, he got in the way.
And eventually they're looking through the snowy mountains and they come across this strange structure that looks otherworldly. They don't know what it
Mhm.
is, and they
Yeah,
end up finding this like a secret passage at the base of it that takes them to a whole new world pretty much.
yeah. It was warm inside the structure too. They're in the Himalayas and all the snow, and looking like Santa Claus is coming to town. And then next thing you know, it's nice, but they don't think they took their coats off. At least not initially.
Yeah. And they somehow end up in this warm sunny place, and after going through a underground tunnel, I don't know how the sun is there, but it is, unless it's
Mhm.
some artificially created sun, which could
That's
be.
true. I didn't. Well, I was just thinking that maybe the tower things were actually making the warmth, and they were actually kind of in a hidden, valley, as it were. That was
That's
my
true.
thought when I was watching it. I was like, okay, so then they've kind of created this ecosystem with these towers, and so that's just the regular sun.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I don't know that they thought too far in the script for that though.
Hard, hard to say.
But if we were to ask David Allen, he might not, because I think he wrote this as well.
Hmm.
He did, yeah. I don't think that he would go, no, it's just the sun.
Yeah. Well, instead of a yeti, they come across a tribe of, I guess, ape men would be a best way to describe
Yeah.
them.
Uh-huh. On
It's like,
IMDb, they're called the hominids.
okay, so
Yeah.
these hominid ape men people,
Yeah.
and very very primitive looking, living in these huts, and
Well,
our
they were on stilts.
yeah, and our crew decides that they're just gonna kind of hang out and observe them for a bit.
Yeah, it's a whole
Uh,
nother thing they never see. I mean, they're doctors. Not a
yeah,
Yeti, but hey, close cousin.
yeah.
Yeah.
uh, uh, unfortunately, there's a disturbance at night, and the hominid village gets attacked. And
Mm.
when our our group goes to investigate, there's no survivors. Everyone is either dead or missing. So they
Hmm.
decide to follow the trail, see what's up.
I have to wonder, knowing what we know, because it took so long to make the movie. Now, from what I read on the background of this, is most of the live action was shot in 90 or whatever. And
Hmm.
so I guess they shot all that at that time. But my thought was that the hominids were kind of a cheap way to not have stop motion at that point because it was cheaper to have people in monkey suits than it would be to do what happens later in the movie. So um, that was my thought as I was watching it. I was like, well, this is interesting because I mean the Yeti scene at the beginning was so fantastic, and these hominids were a real letdown. Comparatively speaking.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And uh, the group ends up discovering a UFO of all things, and they're exploring the UFO, and they find a dried up corpse of a alien in there. And uh, Bob, I don't know about you, but at this point, I'm thinking, man, it's been a while since we've seen any stop motion.
That's what I thought too. I was like, I hope we get back to that because the first part was so good that this is really bumming me out.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, the stop motion is kind of the main reason why you watch these movies.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
eh,
And so yeah, they needed to spread it out a little bit more.
yeah,
But
but
I
but
think yeah, I think now I will speculate that possibly there was supposed to be some more stop motion, but so the talented person in for that aspect of things passed away, and so I think there probably was supposed to be something else in those village scenes that we just never got to see because they didn't want to do whole new things. I'm sure they just finished the stuff that was already started. So
yeah, that's a
they
good
may have
point.
glossed over that aspect of what was supposed to be there at this point. But it gets better, folks.
It does, because our group is soon set upon by uh, a group of stop motion aliens. And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the theory was that uh, the the aliens that attack them are the same ones that landed there and had all this fancy technology, but over time they just kind of, I guess, devolved would be the word for it.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, I think all this got set up, and then apparently either the smart ones left, or or these were just the remnants of that society at this point, because they were not quite as you know didn't seem to be as intelligent as whoever set everything up.
Yeah, yeah, because before our group gets attacked, they're snooping around the ship and they see that dead alien and they play this hologram message, and we can see what the aliens actually looked like before as things went south, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like this sophisticated being, quite different from the ones that attack them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but now at least we're getting into territory for stop motion that's really good. So
Yeah.
the I don't what you would call them. Would you call them lizard people? I mean, what would your terminology when you were watching?
Um, I'd say lizard people is fair.
Yeah, or the reptilians, some kind. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
reptilians. That's another good one.
yeah, but they were definitely lizard type people, and but the way that they were created and so forth, I mean, they looked spectacular, and were very fluid in their motion and integrated into the scene really well. I mean, just like before with the Yeti, it was top notch stop motion.
Yeah, I thought it was done really well, and our group actually gets, like I said, they get captured and they get taken into uh the reptilian headquarters, and they get led to this arena, uh
Mm-hmm.
and there's actually an arena full of these reptilians. So I thought that was a cool scene, seeing all the stop motion reptilians in the stands there.
Yeah, because at that point in time, there wouldn't have. I mean, chances are every one of those was a model that was manipulated. They may have done it in pieces, as far as the process goes, where they would, mat out parts of the screen and not have to move all those at once, and do it in pieces. But they were all, I believe, they were all models, and they were all, manipulated manually, just like all the rest of the stop motion. So there was no, duplicate and copy and paste back then, to just throw a bunch of aliens in the stands. No AI alien duplication going on.
Yeah, yeah, and we finally get the return of the Yeti,
Right.
and
With
we
an
also find out.
you can obviously see his implant now. I think even more so than before.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I was just gonna say we have our answer as to who was doing surgery on the Yeti,
mhm.
because the
How'd they do
reptilians had
that when
this
they
laser
couldn't even
gun.
keep the thing going?
Yeah, but they had a laser gun.
Yeah, had that. All that still worked. What happened?
Must
Well,
have been the
it's not
last.
broken yet, so we're still using it.
Yeah, like the last piece of technology they had.
Right. But it doesn't have to make sense. I mean, part of the kind of the allure and the great thing about movies like this is they don't have to make that much sense.
Hmm.
It's an adventure. You go along with Rondo, and you're on an adventure, and that's the thing that you really are interested in. You're not really overly concerned with the particulars, of
Exactly.
of getting there. It's just happening.
Yeah, and you know what, Bob? Another feature of a lot of the stop motion movies, back in the day, especially ones that Harryhausen worked on. Seems like there's always a scene in there that makes you feel sad for the creature,
Yeah,
and we kind of get that here because uh, they lead the Yeti into the arena and they throw a couple of the captive hominids in there, and
Mm-hmm.
then they zap the Yeti with their laser, and they which drives him crazy, and he gets mad. He kills the hominids, and then afterwards, when the effects of the laser wear off, the Yeti's standing there looking at his bloody hands, and you can see that
Right.
he's really upset about that, and you feel bad. At least
Yeah.
I did.
And it's fantastic how all these little, movements can culminate in you feeling empathy for this character who has been horribly manipulated and, used for his strength to basically entertain a bunch of lizard people. It was
You know,
almost like
it's
it's kind of like a Coliseum arena kind of situation going on there where he's the lion and, they throw in the Christians or the hominids and I think it's mauls the Christians like the lions used to do in Roman times.
yeah, and up next, our cast of characters is gonna have to face the Yeti, uh, but fortunately, they're able to break free, and I think they end up
Oh yeah,
destroying the
yeah. We
laser.
forgot to mention they were captives hanging up. They were like in cages or whatever. We forgot to
Yeah, being
mention that.
forced to watch all of this.
Now the interesting thing is, okay, so I'm going to bring tie two things together here. So if you watch this, and it's not exact, but you have our heroes. They're all bound in cages in above the arena, in the arena. Doesn't it look a lot like Episode 2 from Star Wars? You have three people in cages. You have three people tied to posts, and then the crazed monster comes in. So there's some parallels, oddly enough, in Episode 2 of Star Wars, which Attack of the Clones, right, was way later, and so oddly enough, uh, this mimics a little bit of that.
I
But
haven't seen
that
that in
whole,
forever.
but that whole, you know, kind of Coliseum battle kind of thing is repeated over and over and over in movies. And I am trying to remember. There's probably an older movie that I'm just not recalling that has a very similar motif to it, but it happens multiple times. There's always that kind of the heroes are in jeopardy. They're tied to either tied to a stake or put in a cage, and then the monsters are set loose on them. And we had that here. Kind of, they were kind of just watching, but still they're still in the arena and there's still things going on. So um there's a little bit interesting. So if you watch the two close enough, I think you'll get the not to say that George Lucas and company were ripping off Primevals, but you know, because this was filmed before. It was
Yeah,
filmed way before, and we know that a lot of um, Hollywood directors and so forth watch each other movies before they're released. So never know. Maybe David Allen was showing Lucas footage of this back then, and he's like,
that's a good possibility.
you never know. We'll
Yeah.
never know.
And our heroes are able to escape. Um, Unfortunately, Dr. Collier, she kind of lingers around too long and takes a spear to the gut from one of the reptilians.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but they do get out of there, and then we get another sad scene as uh, the Yeti tries to fight the reptilians, but he's outnumbered and they take him down, which that was a
Hmm.
bummer.
Yeah, because it was a good character, and he was way more expressive than the reptilians. The reptilians were
Yes.
very, you know, what do you want to call it? Utilitarian, right? So they're just going about their business. Not a lot of emotion to it. Kind of menacing, really.
Yeah.
So that was our only sweet, lovable character. Both times gets murdered. The Yeti.
Hmm. And the reptilians they send out a hunting party to bring back the heroes, but the heroes make it back to where the UFO is, and there's a I think there was a another laser type gun over there,
Mm-hmm.
and Matt gets in it and he destroys a dam,
Right.
which it doesn't show this happening, but presumably it floods the reptilian hideout there. I'm guessing that's what happened.
Yeah, that was the they were insinuating that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But and that was, that was a pretty good scene. They, there was some tension and things were
Hmm.
happening, and they had the pacing of it was really good to heighten it a little bit. I mean, they didn't quite have like the dam breaking and all this other stuff happening, but it worked.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought it uh, put a nice end to things, and Dr. Collier passes away, but the rest of the heroes escape,
Mm-hmm.
and they all make it back, and it's I don't know if you call it a happy ending, I guess, but
Well, they don't have big. They had three unknown species, and they didn't get any big discoveries out of it. Other than they already had a Yeti, I guess. So that was that. Maybe that was the big. They still had that going on, but they didn't get the hominid people or the lizard people
no.
to go back with them. So
Although Dr. Collier, being like I guess the high-ranking university person, before she passes away, she gets out her voice recorder and
right.
uh, she tells a little bit about what happened and says that whatever Matt says, believe him, he's telling the truth. So
Hmm.
uh, it ended on a positive note, I guess,
I guess, yeah.
even though she
That
dies. But
recorder was the biggest clunkiest thing you've ever seen, right? When she pulled that thing out, you're like, "What is that?"
well, remember, it's the early '90s.
Yeah, I know. Even in the even in the early '90s, they had smaller recording devices. I was there. I remember this thing looked like it was from the '60s or something. I'm like, she must have got this for a 12th birthday or something and brought this along, but because it was huge and clunky. But yeah, but the funny, so the movie, we had a great thing with the Yeti at the beginning, which is like the first, what would you say, 10 minutes? My guess is, first
If
10
even
minutes of the
that.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that. And then we had about 40 minutes or 50 minutes of no stop motion. And then the last half hour was packed.
Yeah.
And that was the best part of the movie. Besides that little bit at the first with all the lizard people moving around and doing stuff, and then the arena, and then having to get out and being chased essentially, and having spears thrown at them and whatnot. And that was the best part of the movie. And so you have to kind of suffer a little bit through the middle to get that. I mean, you could fast forward, I suppose, um, but you should watch the whole thing if you're going to watch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really, I thought, really the ending parts of the movie were the best parts for me to watch. So,
I would agree with that. What kind of rating would you give the movie?
well, so it depends, right? So, if you want to watch some really good stop motion animation, then obviously it gets like a 9 out of 10 for the parts that are right. As a movie as a whole, I don't know, 5 out of 10. What rating scale do you normally go by on these things? Out of 10, or what do
I,
you do?
I mean, I don't really have a rating scale.
Well, we should make one
uh,
up. Would you
yeah,
rather
I
have
mean,
5 or 10? What do you think?
I don't know, cause like you think about like the Harryhausen movies, and like a lot of those, none of those are like these epic movies or anything, but the stop motion is top notch in them. So
Yeah.
it's
And it's continuous. There's always it has it on interval, right? So you go,
yeah,
exciting stuff, boring stuff, exciting stuff, boring stuff. Where this one we kind of went exciting stuff, a lot of boring stuff, and then the exciting stuff at the end.
Um,
So the pacing was way off. Where like Jason and the Argonauts, for example, or Clash of the Titans, it's throughout the movie that cool stuff happens.
mm-hmm,
And probably I would guess that David Allen, knowing his body of work, that's probably how it was supposed to be. But, given circumstance, you get what you get. There's a couple of fade to blacks during the movie that obviously they probably did that in order to just move things along because they didn't really have anything. And those were probably meant to have um, other stop motion events happening during those, you know what I mean, during that time
mm,
period, because they kind of move, they move, they're on a raft and then they're on this, there's all kinds of weird uh jumps as they get into from the snow to the the jungle area and so forth. And so I think there's things that just didn't get done because of cost and the fact that David Allen wasn't around anymore.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the middle of the movie, it's not terrible. It's just there's not always a whole lot happening,
Right.
and like I mean, you get some scenes of like cheesy fun, I guess, like the introduction scene for Rondo when they're in the streets of Calcutta and he fights off
Mhm.
the two muggers, you know.
Right. Yeah. That's
So
kind of
I mean,
cheesy fun.
it's
A
it's not
little
like it
bit.
was all bad, but just
Yeah,
a
but
few
there's
slow parts.
Rondo. Rondo? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that one out still. But the lizard people were fantastic, and the Yeti was fantastic, and all of that stuff really works, and they made it work and integrate the live action people into the scene really well. And so I think for that, I mean, you know, um, we both, I did the Shutter thing as well. After we had, emailed each other, what have you, and I'm like, oh, Shutter's got a free trial. I'll do that then because I actually I was gonna rent it, and then you mentioned that, so I went out and did the Shutter free trial as well. If you can see it for free, it's worth the time. You know, if you can get it for $3 or something, it's worth the time. $5, $10, I don't know.
Yeah, I think what it boils down to is uh if you're a fan of stop motion animation, then I would recommend you check this out. If you're not a fan of stop motion or you really don't have an opinion one way or the other, eh,
Yeah, probably
might be
not.
one that you want to skip. Is that
Probably,
fair?
probably not for, yeah, probably not for you. Probably not what you would like to watch. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing to me about this is it really reminded me there's an actor called Doug McClure, who was in a bunch of movies in the 70s that
Mm-hmm.
are not stop motion movies necessarily, but they have some stop motion in them. Land that Time Forgot was one of them. I think he was in one of the Journey to the Center of the Earth variations that came out and so forth. But this really reminded me of those style of movies from the 70s. And they're kind of fun movies. There's some action to them, just like this. And um, they're not poorly made. They're actually well made. It's just they're not kind of like a material, a list kind of things. But that's what this reminded me of. And then the reptiles when they came along, and I found out later that he had something to do with this. But there's a movie called Laser Blast, which is from I think it's 78 or 79, and David Allen was the one who helped do all the stop motion for that. And there's lizard aliens and Laser Blast that are very reminiscent. They're more simple construction, and their skin is not as detailed, but they move and so forth, just like the lizard aliens in this movie. And Laser Blast was a kind of on it was kind of a low budget movie that was made when Star Wars came out, and so there's a lot of action to it and a lot of weirdness, but the lizard aliens figure into that movie as well. Again, it's not a if you're not interested in this kind of stuff, you probably don't want to watch it. The two things you can be interested in is it was a alternative to Star Wars, so it was trying to be a low budget Star Wars competition, but it wasn't a fantasy movie in a way. It was set on Earth at that time period. And two, David Allen did all the stop motion for it, and it's really good. And it really stands out when you watch it. You're like, that's the best part of the movie. But the other thing is that in Laser Blast, they blow up a billboard for Star Wars. And it is a direct it was intentional. They intentionally blew up a Star Wars billboard, so it's kind of funny in a way. But all in all, there's the parallels between the two are great, and they're about 10 years apart, and so the you can see the early lizards that David Allen worked on, and then here now you can see the ones that he worked on later after he'd done all these other big movies like Willow and stuff. And it's just, you can see his art and everything has improved so much over those 10 years. Not that the other was bad, it was really quite good, but you can just see the difference, which is kind of interesting, the other thing that I found interesting about all this was then, because I was looking up all this stuff and I was like, wow, all these movies that I've actually seen that he was a part of. And he did a lot of B type movies, like Ghoulies 2, which was, kind of a Ghostbusters ripoff kind of a thing. But he also worked on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is a classic Disney movie, which was an attraction at Disney World forever. And then he worked on Robot Jocks, if you've ever seen that before, which has got a lot of stop motion kind of was a Gundam style robot fighting. So, he was just in everything. He just did all kinds of good stuff.
All
And
right,
so if you
so
just look up his name, David Allen, here's a list of movies if you like that kind of stuff to go check out, because if he was associated with it, chances are it's going to have some pretty interesting things going on.
yeah, definitely. Uh, so want to ask you, Bob. We talked about how since the 80s, their stop motion hasn't really been utilized a whole lot in live action movies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if a, a younger person sees the Primevals, this could be their first exposure to stop motion, and it makes me wonder, could that spark a new interest in stop motion? Maybe we'll get more movies similar to this in the future. What do you think?
I mean, it could. I think that it's ripe. Everything kind of old comes back around and is new again, right? So, we're at a time now when, if you watch the latest Wallace and Gromit movie, it looks so good. I would say it's the best one. Have you watched any of
Uh,
those yet?
the only one that I've watched is Curse of the Were Rabbit.
Okay. And that's one of the later ones. So there's even earlier ones than that, right? So this one, when you watch it, it is just amazing to watch. And you're so invested. You talked about that spark, right? That empathy for the characters and everything. It is incredible how you empathize with Gromit because Wallace is such a doofus and does the wrong things constantly. And he's obvious. He doesn't even talk, but his face is so expressive, right? And we bring back Feathers McGraw, who was kind of the bad guy, the baddie in the previous one of the previous movies, and he's so expressive, and his face rarely changes. His expression is the same almost through the whole movie, but it's the way that they turn his head and the way they tilt his head and everything in with the music and it's such a work of art that you know can feel what this is emoting from this character. um it's just it's amazing. I would, you know, if you're going to watch something now, I think that's the thing to watch is Wallace and Gromit movies, because Nick Park, who does those, is if he made monster movies, they would be gorgeous. Obviously, he doesn't do that because he has his own characters, but he could easily jump in and be the Harryhausen of his time, just in a different genre. You know, and he's got proteges, and so he's getting older and he's got proteges, so I think he wants it to continue on. And so I mean that's where it's at right now. But I would hope, I mean, I am a big fan of monster movies. I mean, one of the things that I think, if you think back to there's going to be a new series of the X-Files. The X-Files was in the early 90s, which was one of my favorite shows. And essentially it had a big monster of the week kind of tone to it. It wasn't stop motion necessarily, but and that was in the 90s, right? So that's, if you think about it, that hits that thing. So it would be great if they kind of combine the two and you did some type of an X-Files stop motion show. Would be tremendous. I'm throwing it out there to the
Yeah,
world. Somebody needs to make it.
that would be pretty awesome. Yeah, as you know, as you mentioned, stop motion has a certain charm to it that you don't get with like other kinds of animation, and uh, it makes me sad that it's kind of gone by the wayside with few exceptions like Wallace and Gromit.
Right.
But it'd be interesting to see what the future holds for it.
It would be. I mean, I think that it's ripe for the picking if somebody has the wherewithal to do it. I mean, it's a lot of work. You know, Shaun the Sheep was a Nick Park thing. If you ever watched any Shaun the Sheep stuff, but it's really good as well. But yeah, it's really right, and I think monster movies in and of themselves are right. So we haven't had too. I mean, unfortunately, I think there's a bit of a difference between um, like horror movies, like they had the Megan doll and the with Annabelle doll. Those are kind of horror movies. Those really aren't monster movies. Monster movies typically, to me at least, aren't evil. They're misunderstood, and eventually, it's just like if you think of Frankenstein, you know, that's kind of the typical monster movie arc, right? Because you this thing is sprung forth from parts, you know, and then everybody thinks it's evil, and the reality is it's just a misunderstood being who can't cope with the world as it is.
Right.
And we don't have enough of that happening, right, you know, in movies right now. It's either all evil, whether it's an evil doll like Chucky or something. There's not that aspect of being, you know, a soul, you know, in the wrong time period, who is not you know, compatible with the surroundings, and you know, vastly misunderstood, and has to get through that situation. We don't have enough of that going on in cinema right now, I don't think. So this could
No.
be, you know, could be something coming up.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. That would be neat. Um, Bob, we're gonna wrap things up here. Uh, would you like to talk a little bit about what you got coming up on your podcast?
Sure. You know, I'm trying to think. Well, we always tell funny stories, so it's a little different than what you and I talked about.
Right.
But and unfortunately, we don't really. I say unfortunately. I think fortunately, we don't plan ahead very far. So each week, it's always brand new and surprising to me. So, but some of the things that happened recently, talk about monsters. I had a wolf in my backyard, and so that was an interesting situation that still hasn't played out all the way. So yeah, it's not every day that you have wild animals of that, you know, caliber. wandering around in your in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. And we just always each week we try to make people laugh, and so that's what we're going to do going forward, is just to see what silly predicaments that I get myself into because of circumstance. I'm the misunderstood monster in this equation, Dan.
And what's the best place people can find the podcast?
You can find us at Static Radio on most of the socials at staticradio.com. If you don't feel like looking anywhere else, you can just type that in and you'll be there.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Uh, Bob LeMent, co-host of Static Radio. Thank you so much for coming on again. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun talking about the Primevals with you. It's definitely as we both kind of agreed on, it's a very good movie to check out if you're into stop motion. If not, maybe steer clear, or just put it on in the
Well,
background or something.
yeah, wait for the end. Kind
Yeah.
of suffer through the middle and wait to the end. Now you're gonna have to watch Q, and then I could watch it, and then we could talk about that one.
Yeah, I do want to watch Q. I'll let you know when I check that out. But thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed our talk of the primevals here. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.